Hi everybody. In this video, we're going to go through with our next topic on comparing and ordering. Before that, let's quickly just remember what we learned about scientific notation. Scientific notation is used to write really small and really large numbers quickly. But what does it really look like? If you look right here, we have a number written out in scientific notation. Remember, when we do a number in scientific notation, we must first always have a coefficient, which is just a normal number, and it must be greater than or equal to 1, and it needs to be less than 10. So just remember, this first number has to be in between 1 and 10. Finally, we always have it to a power of 10. And a power of 10 is when you have a base of 10, and then we have an exponent, like the one right there. Now, the exponent's very important because it tells us how to move our decimal. Positive exponents always move the decimal to the right, and negative exponents always move the decimal to the left. Let me make that prettier, sorry. Left. So let's look what we have down here. Here we have numbers in scientific notation, and let's turn them to standard form. Remember, when you do this, you need to first rewrite the number with the decimal and then move it based on the exponent. So pause the video and go try this number in scientific notation. If you did this one, you would have written 4.35, and you would have moved the decimal 2 spots to the right because the 2 was positive, meaning the final answer was 435. If you had to do it the other way, with a negative, you would have gone ahead and moved the decimal to the left 2 spots. 1, 2. And the decimal would be out there, and inside these empty valleys go 0. And then you would have rewritten it 0.0435. And while this is a correct answer, you always need to make sure you go back and put a number in front of your decimal. And if there's nothing there, we put a 0. For our next problems, it says standard form to scientific notation. So the first one says 43,200. So right now, even though you do not see it, there's a decimal all the way back here. What we need to do is move this decimal so that this becomes a number between 1 and 10. If you move the decimal between the 4 and the 3, that will give us the number 4.32, or 4 3200ths. So that will be my coefficient, and I'm going to multiply it by a base of 10, and the exponent is going to be based off how many times I moved the decimal. So if I go back and count, I moved it once, twice, 3, 4 times. So my exponent is going to be a 4. Finally, to figure out if your exponent's positive or negative, look back at your original number. If the original number is bigger than 1, it's positive. If it's smaller than 1, it's negative. So just by looking at this next problem right here, you should be able to tell, hey, that's going to have a negative exponent. Why don't you pause the video right here and answer, what is 0.432 in scientific notation? Well, if you did this in scientific notation, you would have had to first move the decimal. We would have had to move it right there between the 4 and the 3, giving us 4.32. As always, we say times 10. And let's see how many times we moved it. We moved it 1 time. So we put a 1 there. And because our number was smaller than 1, the original number, we know it's going to be a negative. So remember, that is what we do for scientific notation. That's going to be important because we're going to have to put those numbers in order with other rational numbers later on. So today, let's start up talking about what this unit's really going to focus on. All right? Converting decimals, percents, and fractions into decimals so that we could compare and order them. So first we have a decimal, and it wants us to convert it into a percent. Whenever you convert a decimal into a percent, all you need to do is move your decimal to the right 2 times. 1, 2. And if you did that, this 0.48 or 48 hundredths will become a 48%. Another way to think of this is just multiplying it by 100. On the other hand, we have a percent that we want to turn into a fraction. If you want to turn a percentage into a fraction, remember, percent, the word percent, means per 100 or divide by 100. So all you really have to do is take the number that's a percentage, 97, and put it in a fraction above 100. Then you need to go check if you can simplify. Our next one, we want to turn a percentage into a decimal. When you turn a percentage into a decimal, you really just want to divide by 100. Remember, the word percent literally means divide by 100. So you would just do 97 divided by 100 in your calculator or in long division, and you get it as a decimal. Another way to look at it is if you have a percentage, you want to move your decimal 2 places to the left. Now, even though you don't see a percentage in 97, it is actually right there in the back. And if you would just move it 2 places to the left, 1, 2, you now have your decimal, 0.97. And while that's correct, you always need to make sure you have a number in front of your decimal. So go back and add a 0. And you could call it 0.97. The correct way to say it, though, is 97 hundredths. Our next one, a fraction turning into a decimal.
Good afternoon.
Oh, excuse the announcements for a second.
A couple of bus changes today. Bus number 2053 will be a second level.
So I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully you can hear me through those announcements. Our next one here, we want to turn a fraction into a decimal. If you have to turn a fraction into a decimal, all you do is divide the numerator by the denominator. The numerator is the number on top, and the denominator is the number on the bottom. So if you typed in your calculator 3 divided by 4, you get your answer as a decimal, 0.75, also known as 75 hundredths. Next, if we want to turn a decimal into a fraction, all we need to do is first use the place value to find the denominator. Meaning, if you rewrite this as a fraction, what I'm going to tell you to do is always put these fractions over 1 first. So 0.06. So I'm going to write 0.06. I'm going to put it over the number 1. Now, what we have to do is we're not allowed to have decimals inside of a fraction. We got to move it. So I'm going to move the decimal on the top to the right so that it disappears. It goes behind the 1 spot. 1, 2. And now my decimal's there. And my number on top is now 6. However, when working with fractions, whatever you do to the top number, you must also do to the bottom. So if I move my decimal in the top 2 places over, I need to move my decimal in the bottom 1, 2 places over, and fill in my little values with 0, making this over 100. And this ends up working out to 6 over 100. But as always, we simplify. Both these numbers are even, meaning divide them by 2, and you'll get 3 out of 50. Our final one here, we want to convert a fraction into a percentage. So first, let's turn it into a decimal. So remember, to do that, let's just divide 3 divided by 4, giving us 0 and 75 hundredths. Next, to turn a decimal into a percent, follow our directions from up here from earlier. Move your decimal place over 2 spots. Let's watch me move it over. 1, 2. The decimal is right there, meaning our percent is 75%. So that's how you convert everything into one another. What we're going to practice doing right now is we want to put them in ascending and descending order. Least to greatest, greatest to least. Ascending means you are going up, meaning you are starting at your lowest point. And you're going to your highest point. So ascending means least to greatest. Descending is the opposite, starting at the top and going down. That's greatest to least. So, our step 1, when we do this, as you can see by our problem down here, we have a bunch of different numbers in different forms. So step 1 is always convert each of them to a decimal. Turn everything into a decimal first, also known as standard form. So turn everything into standard form or decimal form. Then what we want to do is we want to line them up and stack them up on top of each other. So let's first turn all of these into decimals, and then I'll show you what I mean by stacking them up. So if I went ahead and did this, 3.7 times 10 to the third, that's a -3, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So my number is 0.0037. 4 to the 0th power, that just equals 1. 0.3 is already a decimal, and -0.29 is already a decimal. Now that you have all the numbers and you've converted them to decimals, we're going to stack them up and line the decimals up. So first we had 0.0037. Then I had the number 1. Then I had 0.3. And then I had -0.29. And what I do is I always go and fill the rest of these place values in with zeros, whichever ones are empty, so they can all line up nice and neat. And then all I got to do, make sure you add the zeros. I should have wrote that down. Add the zeros. Now all you got to do is go left to right and figure out which one's the largest and the smallest. So ascending is least to greatest. So before we do anything, we realize, let's look right away. If there's any negatives, we have one negative. That must be our smallest one. So our least one was this -0.29. So that will be our smallest one, -0.29. For number 2, what we want to go and do is I'm going to cross this one out. And now what I want to do is I'm going to look at each row here. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I want to look at each of these columns. So first, I want to go ahead and look in my 1 spot right there. I have a 0, a 1, and a 0. So right away, I can already tell who's the biggest number up here. It's the number 1. It's 4 to the 0th power. That's my biggest one. So I could put that as my biggest one. And I'll scratch it out. So now I'm stuck between 2. I'm stuck between 0.0037, our number from scientific notation, and 0.3. Now I looked in this first row here, I looked here, and they both have zeros. There's a 0 there and a 0 there. So then let's look to the next row. We'll look right here. Well, we have a 0 in my first one and a 3 in the second one. 0 is obviously smaller than 3, so that makes 3.7 times 10 to the -3rd, the next one. And that would make 0.3 my last one, my third one. And now I have them in order. So really making sure lining them up can be super helpful. Let's do one more together before I have you do one on your own. So next it says place the following in descending order. So in descending order, once again, let's make them all decimals. So first I have 2 3/7. When I see that, I leave the 2 alone, I make a decimal. And then whatever 3/7 is, I just break that behind it. 3 divided by 7 gets me 4285714.3. So I'm going to round that to 2.43. 43% or 0.3%. Remember, I'd have to move the decimal 1, 2 spots left, giving me 0.0043. 4.3 times 10 to the 4th, if I do that one, get a big number. I get 43,000. And finally, 5 halves, 5 divided by 2, gets you 2.5. So first, I wrote them all out. Next, what I'm going to do is line them up. So I'm going to write it in different colors so it stands out. 2.43, 0.0043. Then I have 43,000. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that one's way bigger than the rest of them. And then I have 2.5. Finally, fill in any empty place values behind the decimal with zeros so you can all line them up. All right, and if we're going from descending order, from greatest to least, first, right away, if there's a big one that stands out like 43,000, that obviously stands out. That one's our first one. Let's go ahead and cross it out. We obviously know that one's the biggest one. and that would be 4.3 times 10 to the 4. Our next one, if we look, first, once again, we'll look in our ones row. I have a 2 here and a 2 here, meaning there's a tie. So I'll look at the next spot over, and there's a 4, and there's a 5. 5 is bigger than 4, so that means 5 halves is the next biggest one, followed by the loser in that scenario, 2 3/7, leaving only one number to be my possible final answer, 0.43%. This final problem, I want everybody to do on their own. So pause the video right here and do this on your own. Thank you for watching our video, and please look to the key for the answers on the final problem.